Hi everyone, I am Balaji Chippada and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In continuation of our SQL series, in this video, let's learn how you can create tables and how you can define your own schema of your table and how you can create primary keys and foreign keys as well. So without any delay, let's get started. We are on the SQL workbench. Let's use IMDb database. And as you have remembered the IMDb database, we have multiple tables, right? Now let's say I want to create one more table called language. Okay. And I want to have two columns in which the first column is the movie ID and the second column is language. So let's say we have movie ID 1 and we don't know in which language the movie is directed. So I will have 1, let's assume it is of English, and 2 I will say Hindi, and 3 I will say Tamil. So likewise I can maintain a table in which this ID column will be acting as a foreign key to a movie table called movies, so that I can link this ID with that movie names and I can maintain the language of each of these movies. So how can I achieve this task? To achieve this, I need to create this table, right? So that is where data definition language will come into the picture. So let me explain the syntax of how you can achieve this. So we have a keyword called create table, and we are creating this table under a database called IMDb. And in the initial phase, we have seen how you can create a database, right? So you can do create database and you can give the database name. So this will create a database, and after that you will have to use the database. Here I'm using IMDb database, and inside this I want to create a table. And what table I want to create, I am saying table name should be language. And after that I need information about these columns, right? So that is where you will open a parenthesis and you will say my first column it would be ID, and the next one is the data type. So this is an ID column in which it will take integer values, and this should be my primary key for this table. We have learned about primary keys and foreign keys as well, right? And this is my first column information, and then I would move to the second column, which is the language column, and I am saying variable character which is of length 50. So it should not cross the length of 50. If I take an example of English, so it is of how many elements? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the length is 7. So what I'm saying is my second column should be language, and it is of length max 50, and it should not have any null values. So if you look at it carefully, I have three different things. The first one is my column names, and the second one is the data type, and the third one is a constraint. It is a condition, right? So whenever I am creating a table, inside this I have to specify all of my columns, and next to these columns you have to specify data types, and next to these you have to specify constraints. Now let's understand what are data types and what are all the constraints that are available. Now I am on the Google server. I will just search for SQL data types, and if I click on this and if I click on images, I will get this image. So I can go to this website here, and if I show you, this is a really good example of showcasing what are all the different data types. And if you observe, I haven't memorized all of these things. So it is not mandatory to memorize all of these things, and it is always advised to learn. That means whenever you don't know something, if you know how to utilize internet, there is nothing that can stop you. You should always have the hunger to learn new things, because I will not be able to cover all of the things in detail, right? I can cover most of the things which are used in the society or in the industry, but the remaining things you have to learn by yourself. There is internet, you can learn by yourself. Now let's go back to our theory, which is SQL data types. There are different groups of data types. Let's say I want to create some numeric data. Inside it I have bit, tiny int, small int. Int is the one that we have used right now, big int, decimal, numeric, float, real. So these are all the different data types that are under numeric data types. You can use any one of them based upon your specific use case. And you have specific data types for date and time as well. You want to store the date or time or date time or timestamp. So you have to use these specific data types so that it will be easy for you to process in the later stages. And then we have character or string data types, in which we have character, varchar is basically variable character. We just have used this, right? Varchar of length 50 and varchar of max and text. And we have unicode, binary, and miscellaneous, in which we have XML, JSON. So these are all the different data types that are available in SQL. But one thing is, not all of these data types are supported by not all of the servers. So let's say SQL will support some type of data types and Oracle will support some of the data types here. Not every workbench will support all the data types, so you need to make sure you refer to the documentation before creating these things. Hopefully that is clear. Now let's go back to our one. Now let's create this table. Let's execute this table first. So this got created. Now if I do a refresh of this, I have a table called language. Hopefully that is clear. And inside it, I have two columns, ID and language. Now we have just created this. If I select star from language, I am not going to get any of the data because we haven't inserted any of the data, right? But we have learned how to insert data into tables by using a command called insert. So I can insert data into language using insert command. Now let's understand the constraints. So these are the high level constraints which I think is important for you to learn. There might be other constraints as well. The first one is not null. So let's say I want to create my column in which I should not have null values. Then I can use not null, and I can use unique. That means all the values of the column should be unique. And one more thing is, when I say unique as a constraint, it can have null values because null is not considered as an element, right? And then we have primary key, which is a combination of not null and unique. And then we have foreign key. So in the previous example, we have created a language table, but we haven't linked this foreign key, right? Because this ID column should be linked to movies table ID column, right? Then only it will get linked. Otherwise, how can you connect these two tables? So I will show you how you can do that as well. Just a minute. And we have check. Let's say I want to check every time if some record is getting added. I want to check for some specific value. And what should be the default values? Let's say I will not provide any specific language. So by default, I will say it should be English. So default value is English. And index is another concept which I cannot be covering, or I will not be cover in this series because it is a very huge course. But if you want to learn, you can google it by yourself. Now that you have understood different kinds of constraints, now let's drop this language table. Drop table language. So if I have to delete the table like this, I can just use drop table and it will get deleted. Now let's look at this example and understand everything in detail. I am creating a table called language, and my first column is ID, and it should be of integer data type, and it is of auto increment. So what is auto increment? So this is my ID column. For the first time, I will have to keep the value as 1. When I'm doing insert into, I will say language, and I will have to provide ID value 1, and I will do English, right? And when I have to do it again, I have to do 2 and Spanish. So every time when I am inserting into the data, I give the ID value as well, right? So if I don't want to do these things, I can just do auto increment. So by default, it will increment the value by 1 whenever you are adding a new record. And then second, we have language column. I have varchar of length 50. and it should not be any null values. So this is a constraint. And third, we have country id. Basically this should be movie id. Okay, and it is of integer column. And default language varchar default is English, so I'm creating a default as English. And primary key, I'm saying it should be the primary key. And this movie id, which is basically movie id, should be the reference key in another table called country. In this case we have movies and we can say id. So let me rephrase this. So we have one more table called movies, in which we have id, right? So I will do movies, I will have id, and it should be movie id. And I will copy this, I will do this. So what we are doing at a high level, we are creating a table in which it should have id column, language column, movie id column, default language column, and this id should be my primary key, and this movie id should be my foreign key, and this foreign key references to be the movies and the id column. So let's execute this. So this got executed. Now let me search, and I have this language table in which I have all of these columns. Now we can link this movie id towards this movies table id. So that is how you will create a foreign key and primary key. You can search for multiple examples on how you can create multiple tables on Google, but I have covered majority of the things that are needed for you to learn. If you have any queries so far, please let me know in the comment section below, and I will reply to each and every one of you. And that's all for this video, guys. In this video, we have learned how to create a table and how to create multiple columns and how we can specify the data types and what are all the different constraints. And we have also learned how to create a primary key and how to link a foreign key from one table to another table as well. If you learned something new from this video, a sub to the channel would be appreciated, and click that bell icon to get notified daily. And we will meet in the next video. Bye bye.